This is Pandemic Legacy Season 1. My wife and I have played through this game. It is finished. So you may be wondering, why haven't I thrown this in the trash? Well, there's a bunch of components in here I'm going to keep, I'm going to use to, you know, make my own games and that kind of stuff for fun. I enjoy that kind of thing. So Pandemic Legacy, that is one thing with this game. It's a legacy game. You're putting stickers on the board, you're tearing up a bunch of cards and different things, you're marking on the board, you're sharpieing on stuff, crazy stuff. Lots and lots of stickers, lots and lots of changes. If you wanted to, you could keep this and you could play the regular game of Pandemic. So you could do that. I mean, there's definitely some use to this potentially afterwards, but I'd assume that if you're wanting to play Pandemic Legacy, you probably have Pandemic already. So a lot of people will legitimately just use this for parts for other games or toss it or whatever, but you cannot replay through the campaign of games unless you want to peel off the stickers, which is really hard, and put them back on, and it wouldn't work, so don't try and do that. This was a fun experience. I did really enjoy it. I think maybe it was hyped up a little too much for me, so my expectations were a little bit more. There definitely were some moments in this, though, that I was really excited, like, oh man, that's a super fun twist, that's cool, how are we gonna do this, all of that. So there were those moments, but there were definitely some lulls where this is a 12 to 24 game campaign, so you're playing basically 12 months. So January, you play early January, and if you beat it, you move on to February. If you don't beat it, you play late February, and that kind of turns out to affect some different things that make your next game a little bit easier, which is really nice. I think the balance in there worked really well, actually. My wife and I played just 2 players through, and so I think that one thing that was kind of a, well, let me finish that first thought. So we played through, I think it was 17 games that we played, so it was kind of a nice balance of months that we had to try 2 times to get through, and months we were just able to get on our first try. So we played 17 games, and I definitely think there were some months at the beginning, like the very first game, you're basically playing a game of Pandemic, and then pretty quickly it changes, and you're like, oh man, this is cool. How are we gonna work this out? This is different. I feel like in the middle, though, there were a number of games where it was like, man, there's not much that's changing. Like, we're going through the deck and like looking at some new cards, some things are changing, but there just wasn't anything major that was changing in the middle. And then near the end, there were some crazy changes that were super fun that I really enjoyed. I think there's a great ending to this game that I really like. We did play December 3 times because I paid way too much money and spent way too much time on this to end and not win, so that's just stupid. So if you enjoy board games, don't be such a stickler about it. Like, just make changes to where you enjoy it more. So if you need to play the December 15 times to beat it, I think that maybe you should if you want to. That kind of thing. That's my own thing. It's just putting your own house rules so you enjoy games more. Something you might as well do. But there were definitely some games in the middle that were just not all that exciting. And they were pretty similar. I didn't feel like we were doing much different. There were just some new changes and components that came out where it's like, huh, I don't think I want to use that. And there were others that came out, it's like, oh, that's really cool. So I think some of that would definitely change if you're playing a 4-player game. And so one thing that I think is kind of cool, here's a minor spoiler. So if you don't want to listen, you can skip forward a few seconds, but you're unlocking like some new characters as you go throughout the deck, which is kind of cool. Like, it's really pretty cool. But as my wife and I were playing, it's like, huh, I don't think I want to play that character. And so that was one of the things where it's like, we're going through, and it would have been fun for the characters to be so different and the missions and tasks we have to do to be so different that it would have like forced us to play different characters, or you have your one character that you're just like changing all these things to, and there's not new characters coming out, there's just new upgrades and things. That would have been kind of cool. So overall, really fun. At the end of every single game, whether you win or lose, you get to do 2 upgrades, which was super cool. So there's things you can change to the board, things you can change to your character, all sorts of cool stuff like that I really enjoyed. And so you get to change the game and be like, oh yes, this is going to be easier because of this, or that's going to be easier because of that. I really enjoyed that, and there definitely were moments where there's 8 boxes, you open, you get to open them throughout the game, and when we opened one, it's like, oh man, that is really cool. So there's definitely some aspects to this, looking back, that I really enjoyed. So I would say that if you enjoy Pandemic, you will really enjoy Pandemic Legacy. There's enough similarities, but there's some really fun changes to it that I think you'll really enjoy. If you hate Pandemic, I wouldn't recommend this game because it's so similar in the base that it doesn't change enough that you would be able to get past that, I don't think. So if you've played Pandemic, I think that's a huge indicator if you love this game or not. And it is a fun Legacy game. It's probably the most popular Legacy game out there. So hopefully that gives you just a nice little touch and taste of Pandemic Legacy, what it is, what it does, and why it may or may not be right for you. Thanks.